Hello everyone, George DeSantis here with a look at the market for the week ending November 17th, 2017. And before we go further, let's do the usual. Take a look at the disclaimer. You can pause the video and read the disclaimer because it's important that you understand that this is not investment advice and that this is purely for educational purposes. Let's begin by taking a look at some charts now. The first chart we look at is the weekly chart of the S&P 500. So here's a chart of the S&P 500. It's a weekly chart. Now on this weekly chart of the S&P 500, here's what I'm noticing. First of all, we had a nice bottom here. We found support at the 30 weighted moving average, this green line. And we rallied from there all the way up to touch the upper Bollinger Band, which is at 2.72 standard deviations. And since then, it's went up a little bit, but then it's basically consolidated, gone into a bit of a trading range, almost made a low within the 9 and the 30, which would be a buy signal. But the important thing to notice here too is that the moving averages still remain above each other. The 4, the 9, the 30, all above each other. And if we go to MACD now, we'll see that there is still that divergence of MACD from price. So that's the negative here. That's the bullish scenario, the bearish scenario, I'm sorry. However, if we look at RSI 12 is way above the 60% line, and that's saying that this trend is still intact. And if we go to the directional movement index and the ADX, we find that it's still indicating to us that we have a nice uptrend, and the DI plus is above the DI minus. So in summary, the weekly chart is still looking very bullish, except for the fact that we have this bearish divergence, and it may have played some of itself out already in this consolidation period. So let's look now at the daily chart. So here's a daily chart of the S&P 500. And what I'm noticing here is that, yes, we did get somewhat of a breakdown here when the 4 crossed below the 9. The 4 EMA crossing below the 9 EMA, but both of them stayed above the 30 weighted moving average. So it seems to me this trend is still intact insofar as the moving averages are concerned. And I'm also seeing some bullish indications here that I might point out. First of all, whenever this market tends to pull back, we get some buying. And this reflected in the bullish engulfing candle at this level here. So this body of this candle totally engulfs the body of this one. So that's a bullish engulfing candle. We come back down, we get a hammer, we get another doji, another bullish engulfing candle. We get another hammer here. We come back down to that support level of 25.65. We closed just on that, about that level. And then the next day, which I think was Thursday, yes, we had this nice bullish candle here. Now, if you take these 3 candles together, you have a morning star, bullish morning star. This is followed on Friday by a bullish harami. So there are quite a few bullish candlestick patterns that I'm seeing here. So I remain bullish. The weekly trend is still up, and the daily chart broke down a bit, but finding support at 25.65. Now, if we look at the bar in the middle of the chart, RSI 12, although it's not as effective on the daily chart as it is on the weekly chart. That's the chart that the research was done on when we investigated the RSI 12. But it's still above the 40% line, so we take some solace from that. MACD is in bearish territory, but it seemed to have trended up a bit, and that's a good sign for the bulls anyway. And before we take a look at anything else, we need to look at the directional movement index and ADX. And ADX sort of flattened out here, while the DI plus moved above the DI minus once again, as we had these bullish indications here, the bullish harami and the bullish morning star. So the trend on the weekly chart still very bullish. The daily chart showing us more strength, support, etc. That's the general scenario. And let's take a look at individual stocks. So as usual, we'll start off with Apple. I own it, did for a while. Notice that Apple became overbought on the extreme, we call these the extreme charts. 90%, it's the regression channel. 50%, 10%. So it went all the way above the 90% line, and now it's pulled back a bit. But notice that it's now in the buy zone between the 9 red moving average and the green line. So it's in the buy zone, and I want to show you one other chart on Apple. Let's take a look at the seasonals. And the seasonal, we have a seasonal play at this time, 11:15 to 11:29. And let me show you one other thing on Apple. Apple sort of follows the general market. Remember on the S&P, we hit the upper Bollinger Band, and then we consolidated for a while. Well, you can see that consolidation here, and then Apple fell into the buy zone, and we seem to be finding some support here. That's Apple. I still own it. Here's Facebook, similar kind of thing. We can see that the price fell from the upper channel here. It came all the way back down into the buy zone between the 9 and the 30, and then rallied a bit from there. So we're coming out of the buy zone here. And by the way, I didn't own Facebook recently, but I bought it back. I bought it back again last week. And we have this nice chart of the trend line here of the earnings. Really powerful earnings. So I like that. And the seasonal looks very similar to Apple. Look at this one. It's still, 11:13 to 11:29. So we're in that sweet zone now for the seasonal on our Facebook. Here's another chart of Apple, of Facebook, the daily chart. And you can see how we went to the upper Bollinger Band and now consolidated all the way back into the buy zone. And now it seemed to be rallying from here. Here's that stock that I mentioned before, Align Technology, ALGN. It is one of the IBD 50 stocks, in fact, one of the best performing ones. And you can see here that it is overbought. Now, I did buy it back, and for a couple of reasons. I won't have the time to go into all of them, but it rallied all the way from here. It gapped up on earnings, and it continues to do well. And insofar as seasonals are concerned, it is now going in a seasonal play. So this is one of the reasons that I bought it again. 11:21 to 12:10, we get a average move of about 9%. So I'm in this one again. Let's take a look at something else. Here's a chart of NVIDIA. I bought this one again early last week. What we see here is that it's now at about, 74 on the extreme. So it has a little room at the top. But this has been a consistent, steady performer. So I wanted to get back into NVIDIA. And for reasons other than this chart, because it's a seasonal play as well. Toward the end of the year, it is when a lot of these stocks move. November 20th to December 7th. So I'm particularly considering this a seasonal play, although notice that from August all the way to the end of the year and all the way into February, this stock tends to move. And then it levels off at this level here until about August again. So I would like to participate somewhat in this move here. Hopefully we'll get that same kind of a move again. Here's a chart of Universal Display, OLED. We looked at this one before. Very overbought, but boy, did it come in with good earnings. You can see the earnings increasing here, and it just doesn't seem to give up. I bought some. I didn't take a large position, but I bought some, and I would look to add to it on any pullback. I would look to add to it. Okay, let's look at something else. Here's another one of the IBD 50 best performing stocks, Arista Networks. Apparently doing a lot of business with companies like Amazon and Microsoft, etc., who are providing cloud services. Again, similar kind of chart. It just seems to keep chugging along. So I don't own this one right now. But if I wanted to buy it, I would wait for a little pullback. Okay, next one. Here's a chart of FFTY, the ETF of the IBD 50, which we love a lot, thanks to Terry, who brought it to my attention. Notice the narrow range here. So there's very little volatility, and it came down to the 10% line recently, but again, it's on the run. So I like FFTY. I've added to it. I've bought quite a few shares, and I like it very much. Next one. Another ETF that I own quite a bit of is XLK. It is technology again. It's large cap technology stocks, as opposed to the FFTY or IBD 50, which is more of a growth basket of stocks. And you could notice that XLK dropped between the 9 and the 30, which is the buy zone, and then it went up again. This is Thursday's action, Friday here. So we own XLK, and it's performing very, very well. And the volatility is a little more than in the FFTY, but it's not that bad at all. So I own a lot of this one. Here's one of my favorites, Visa. And what we can see here is that Visa was oversold. It rallied, became overbought, pulled back to the oversold line. And now it's closing in a buy zone between the 9, the red line, and the 30. So Visa is one of my favorites. I own quite a bit of it. And I want to show you something else on Visa. Here's a weekly chart of Visa on TC2000. And what I want to point out here is that recently I wrote in the formula for the sum of the rate of change indicator that I used to use on super charts. And because I can't use Windows XP anymore, I have to put it in here. So I was able to put it in here. And now you can see that since the sum of the rate of change indicator broke above the 4% line, it's still very much in the buy territory. So as long as it stays above 4%, we usually use the sum of the rate of change indicator this way. So I like this very much, and I still own a lot of it. Here's a TC2000 chart of NVIDIA, which I own again. I think I mentioned that maybe before. Excuse me if I discussed this one before. But what I'm noticing here is that it wasn't a squeeze. It rallied from there, went into another squeeze, and seems to be rallying again. The fact is, it is somewhat overbought, but you know, some of these movers can remain overbought for a while before they pull back. So I own some of this again. Here's another one of those IBD 50 high flyers. It's Square. It's in the payment systems. You've seen the ads on TV. So this is a high flyer. This has been up tremendously in the current year, 2017. I find it looks too overbought here, too extended. So I would look for any kind of a pullback if I were interested in buying it. Well, that pretty much brings us to the end of our time here. So happy Thanksgiving. Have a wonderful week. And let's hope that the market continues to treat us kindly. Talk to you again about this sort of stuff next week.